All right, hey, welcome to MiWeek After the Show. We're streaming live on the web. We were live for the last hour talking about neighborhoods in Detroit and specifically the Levernois-McNichols corridor. And so we wanted to actually just take this opportunity now to talk to the audience and get some good conversation going and some dialogue after everyone's had to sit here for an hour and listen to what a lot of people have had to say. And we also have some of our panelists up here. We have Lauren Hood from the Live 6 Alliance. I'm sorry, my earpiece is falling out. Maurice Cox from the City of Detroit and Dr. Antoine Garibaldi from the University of Detroit Mercy. So I wanted to open it up and just going to get some comments and some thoughts about what you thought about the show and some of the conversation we points about how you can start bringing back neighborhoods and what are the most important things. So we do have someone who wants to start us off here tonight. Sir, what's your name?
Gene Cunningham.
Okay, Gene, go ahead and what did you want to talk about?
Years ago, the city used to have a program designed for urban rehabilitation known as the Nuisance Abatement Repair to Own Ordinance. Now that ordinance is still on the books, even though the city hasn't implemented it in over 10 years. Why is so much of the money that comes from Washington, particularly as a result of the robo-signing settlement, used for demolition and not rehabilitation, or, as it was originally intended, to keep people in their homes?
All right, Gene, thanks for that. Maurice, you want to take that on?
For me.
Yep.
Well, Detroit, as you probably know, is probably the most efficient at demolishing blight in the country right now. When the demolition season begins, more than 100 homes a week that have been often causing a hardship for neighborhoods is now being removed. I think those resources have been targeted first in the places that are most dense and most occupied, which is a strange strategy because it hasn't always been done that way. And then as the city has eliminated blight in those areas, they expand the borders, the boundaries to include more. And so the goal is really to get to a blight-free neighborhood. And then to come back in for all of those homes that are recoverable to rehab those homes. And we have different resources to do that, and the private sector can be a big part of bringing back those homes. So it's a two-part strategy. I do think that houses, the sheer tens of thousands of houses that are vacant has really been a drag on the recovery of neighborhoods. So I genuinely support this administration's focus on demolishing houses that cannot be recovered, ridding neighborhoods of blight, and then moving aggressively to rehab those that can be rehabbed.
Lauren, let me ask you, how big of a problem is blight in this area and what you're working with right now?
Pretty big. So I think the concentration for Live 6 is doing some organizing of community members, but in the physical space, it's the commercial strip in between the two universities. And I would say it's about 75% vacant. And by vacant, I don't mean they just emptied out like last month or last year. So things have been sitting vacant for like, again, with my 10, 20 years. Mm-hmm. But, and I don't think people understand the state that some of these spaces are in when you're talking about something that's been vacant. So in Detroit, I feel like if something's vacant for 5 minutes, it gets stripped. So it's got like no HVAC, no electrical, no plumbing. There's a hole in the roof where somebody broke in.
So someone just can't go in and go, oh, I'm just going to rehab this for $75,000 and we're going to be all good. In some cases, you're looking at something you just might just knock down and start from scratch.
That's where we're starting,
anyway.
and people need to get that memo so that you know what you're getting into. We're starting at that place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question. Hi, sir. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Garland Hardiman, and I'm a realtor, and I also live just 2.5 miles south of here in the Russell Woods Historic District of Detroit. And my question is to everyone on the panel in regards to what the component parts are going to be where you spread it out more than just doing blight removal. We have homes that are abandoned in my historic district, and I'm president of our association there. I don't want to see those homes demolished. They're beautiful homes that were built in the 1920s and 30s, but they do need to be rehabbed. And some of that money that you're using for blight, like over $180 million, needs to go to people who are impoverished, who can't afford, who own their homes but cannot afford to rehab their homes through grant dollars. And I think in part that's what it was intended for initially. Also, there's very draconian measures as far as taxes. Many people are falling victim to the Wayne County Treasurer's Office imposing foreclosures for failure to pay taxes when many of them were at or below the poverty level and should have been exempt from paying property taxes in the first place. And so all of these component parts, I didn't hear that discussed among the panelists today, but they're very important to retain the Detroiters who are here and who have been here for decades. And while there has been a tremendous focus on Midtown, Corktown, and downtown, and I sell a lot of properties in all those areas, I'm concerned about my neighborhood and surrounding communities throughout the city of Detroit and how those $180 million of blight money is going to be spent to retain the Detroiters here.
All right, who wants to tackle that? Maurice, I'm going to have to look at you again.
I think your point is well taken. I am planning for the people who are already here. I can't plan for some phantom population that will come. All I can do is plan for the Detroiters who are here. And our first obligation is for a young person to grow up in a neighborhood that is not full of blight. That's not natural, and they shouldn't have to do that. So we feel our first obligation is to rid neighborhoods of blight. Our second obligation is to rehab all of these beautiful homes, and there are tens of thousands of homes that could be rehabbed. And so part of our strategy was to ask the development community to stop building these little vinyl boxes in our neighborhoods, right? That can't possibly hold a candle to the historic homes. So we're shifting away from the new construction of single-family houses to the rehabbing of those precious houses that you're talking about. And then we have to have a strategy for all of the other vacant land. And I look forward to the day where people will walk through the neighborhood and feel like they're walking through a garden. And I think that that's possible, where every vacant lot is contributing to people's sense of well-being, people's sense of physical beauty. And that, the good thing is that landscape costs a lot less than bricks and mortar, and it's seasonal, and it flowers. So that's a very different paradigm. When we go around the country and we look at other cities and how they're going about revitalizing neighborhoods, we haven't found that strategy. Detroit is writing the playbook on this strategy. So if you take away anything in terms of the strategy that I'm talking about, it's a blight-free neighborhood, rehab all the homes, and green everything else. That's the formula that we're trying in Fitzgerald. And by the way, who is going to build those landscapes? They're Detroiters who live in the neighborhood. So this is a shout out for the Greening of Detroit, who is our partner in green collar workforce training. We have a group of men who are on the ground now clearing tens of acres of parcels that are being readied for landscape. So these young men are rebuilding their own neighborhoods, and that's the Detroit story that I think is at the core of our strategy.
You know what, Maurice, while I was listening to the interview, it was Garland, I didn't want him to go away because he says he works in real estate, and he's a real estate agent. And can I just ask you really quickly, how have things changed for you in terms of your work and buying and selling of homes right now? What are you seeing, I guess? Can you tell us in some of the neighborhoods that you're working in?
We are seeing an uptick in pricing throughout the Detroit area, but mostly in Midtown, Downtown, and Corktown. In some of the more established neighborhoods like Sherwood Forest, University Village, Green Acres, on the west side, Palmer Woods, on the east side, Indian Village, English Village, those are more stable neighborhoods. They always have been. They are starting to see a rise in pricing. But overall, in certain other neighborhoods, there has not been much of a change in the last 5 years. And consequently, you have more people who are abandoning those neighborhoods because of lack of services. The roads are bad, the number of blighted homes and abandoned homes. But many of those neighborhoods need to be retained because the housing is so magnificent in all of those neighborhoods, and you can attract more people. I see people, I had a client came from France last week. He bought a home that was it was foreclosed in a mortgage, and it had shutters, metal shutters on it to keep people out. But it needed a lot of rehab work on the inside. He made an offer on that property. There are other people that are moving from surrounding communities like Warren, Farmington Hills, and others coming back to Detroit. But my main concern as a Detroit resident, I was born and raised here, is to make sure that the current residents can maintain their homes. And I think with $180 million, if it was spread out more evenly across the board in grants, in helping people to rehab their properties, creating green space with the program you have currently where you can buy a side lot. I've done that. I've purchased several properties. So all of those things are important components of revitalizing Detroit.
Good, thank
and I'd like
you.
to get your name and your phone number. I'd like to talk to you.
He's going to follow up. Good, thank you. I just wanted to get a good look at real estate. I'm sorry, you had another woman standing ready to ask a question. Go right ahead. Hi there, ma'am. Go ahead and give us your name.
Hi, good evening all. My name is Cheryl Anderson Small, and I am the acting president for the Livernois University Merchants Association, a UDCA, University District resident, and an owner of a 28-year-old business located on Livernois, south of 6 Mile Metro Home Medical Supply that's now retired. Dr. Giaboldi, and welcome Lauren again to our neighborhood. She's been an undaunted, tireless warrior for the championing I Live 6. In 2002, sir, we were part of a stakeholder that actually branded University Commons through LUMA, Livernois University Merchants Association. And it was an effervescent and forward march. And that was the county and U of D and Mercy. And unfortunately, the monies did not come forward in 2002, but there was a very aggressive and asset-based plan for U of D to come from behind the bars, with all respect, sir, and come to their property on the west side of Livernois. Could you give us a thumbnail of what that plan is? It was a very successful event that occurred 2 weeks ago, and there was a real sense of solidarity and unity in bringing forward our students, our neighbors, and other enjoying the streetscape of that activity. Please tell us what is going to ensure that there is sustainability of the aggressive move now with Live 6.
Dr. Garibaldi.
Well, happy to do that. I wasn't here in 2002, but since 2011, I would say a lot of the things that we've been doing, I think replicates some of those things that were probably talked about back in 2002. I was out there for that Build a Better Block event that afternoon, and Lauren had a major role in it. Our School of Architecture also did. And I agree with you. I think that it really did, kind of bring a sense of solidarity and also provided a little bit more activity than usually would happen on that particular block and in that particular space, which is actually owned by the university. That's one of the things that we want to do with Live 6 Alliance. It's really bringing about placemaking. When we talk about placemaking, it's really bringing the neighbors together and to talk about what it is that we want. And I emphasize the fact that neighborhood stabilization, business attraction, retention, and the safety component of our goals for Live 6 really came from the neighbors. And that was probably about 2 years of research. Some of it came from the capstone activities, which Gaston Nash talked about a few minutes ago too. So there are lots of different events. I mean, Lauren as the champion, and really she's spending all of her days and nights really working on some of those activities so that we can do a little bit more, but it's only a start. There are a lot of other things that we have been talking about. There are things that I think that we can do over the next several years. And the good thing about that particular activity is that we had representatives of all of the different neighborhood organizations there. And when you talk about University Commons, which I certainly spent a fair amount of time talking with Kim Tandy when I first came here, and a number of the other business owners that are a part of that, University Commons still exists, and we certainly did not want to create another entity unless there was an understanding that there would be cooperation between both that organization and also Live 6. So you're going to hear a little bit more about it. We're only about 8 months into the establishment of Live 6. Lauren is the one and only staff person there. So we try to give her a lot of assistance with Dan Patera in the School of Architecture and a number of other people like Michael Forsythe with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, and the Kresge Foundation is there too. But I think that Live 6 is just the beginning of the kind of organization that's really going to get a lot more of these neighborhoods even more tightly knit.
All right, let's get to another question we have right there, and then we'll come to you, sir. Hang
Yes,
on one moment.
I'm Roy McAllister Jr. I'm president of Greenwich Park Association, and I live right down on Otter Drive. And my comments and my question will probably be addressed to each one of you. And that is, one of the things that brings back a viable community is when people look about moving into a community, they look at safety, they look at schools, and they look at an area where they can shop. And those are some of the things they're talking about. But some of the things I'm concerned about is, one thing that you did hear during the talk was people have been living in these neighborhoods for 25, 40 years. That means their age. What is the program that are going to be involved as far as helping the senior citizens get their property back in order and making them viable for the rest of their lives, as well as the young people that's coming into the neighborhoods? What are we doing as far as making sure that the education system is for their children and things of that nature? So those are some of the things that I am concerned about as far as Live 6 building up, as well as moving out further down west and east within our neighborhoods.
You want to start with that, Lauren?
I don't really want to touch education or.
Well, you know what, but I think maybe you
Or
could address
Yeah.
maybe the gap, the age gap that you're going to have to be servicing people in the neighborhoods who are on the older end, but then you're going to be trying to be cultivating younger people to move into the neighborhood as well.
Sure. Well, it's really tricky. I think people need to be engaged in different ways, and people need to be outreached to in different ways. We've been having conversations about why we see the same small group of people or large group of people, but it's the same people we see all the time. Like, how do we expand beyond that group? So you need multiple means of communication for people based on their age. Old people aren't going to see a thing on Facebook about coming to a meeting. I know that one of the Block Club presidents texts her people to come to meetings. We have to investigate all kinds of options when we're thinking about how we get people to show up for things. And then when we're thinking about the programming, we need to think of it in terms of not something that appeals to us, the people that are planning it, but what appeals to the people that we're trying to engage. So again, it takes a lot of listening. And it's a slower process than most people would like it to be, but I feel like it's more authentic and it's going to be more sustainable, but it's going to take time.
Maurice, did you want to address something that Roy said?
Sure. I think that we are in a very experimental time where we're trying things that are perhaps a little unconventional. So for example, I'm concerned about displacement. So I'm interested in rental, good, affordable rental housing, so that people who come and see improvements in their neighborhood and see that the first people who are getting housing are people who are in the rental market, that signals a very different strategy than the only thing is home ownership. Because not everyone is going to immediately access home ownership. But if you are a homeowner and you have stuck it out with the city has created all kinds of programs through the Housing and Redevelopment Program where you can get a zero-interest loan to fix up your porch or repair your roof. So I think it's both and I would say that it's been very heartening to come to community meetings, and actually there are a lot of seniors who come to these meetings. And the beauty of working with folks who are senior is they remember Livernois McNichols back in the day when it was a complete neighborhood, when there were neighborhood shops. So when we talk about having neighborhood shopping, they're just remembering how it was in the 50s and in the 60s. And it helps those who weren't around then to know that this is possible. We're not talking about something that was impossible. Mm-hmm. So I think, be honest with you, I'd like to plan for the 20-something-year-olds. and the teenagers. So we have to make a really special effort to reach out to our neighborhood schools to get those 20-something-year-olds and 30-something-year-olds who, 40 years, 50 years from now, they're going to be around. So we have to plan, I think, with them in mind as well.
Did you want to add something before we went to the next question?
I would just add that we have a number of senior citizens in this area who our students work very closely with through Campus Kitchen. There are a number of those individuals whom I spoke with early on. Some of them are retired teachers who are approaching 90. We've got retired Tuskegee airmen who live in this neighborhood. And of course, our concern always is who's going to take care of that residence once those individuals move on. And so our engagement with them has allowed us to at least find out a little bit about their families and their their children, so that we can even talk about, what may happen, for example, to the home. And then we're very fortunate in this area with a number of elementary schools and a couple of middle schools too. So there's a great opportunity to work more with young people for sure.
Okay, let's go on to our next question. Hi, sir, what's your name?
Peter Cummings.
Hi, Peter, what's your question?
Well, I have a couple of, just one comment and
Sure.
then a question.
Go
And
for it.
I want to salute public television and UDM for doing this. I think it's a great event, and I'm delighted that I could be here. And anyone who has any question about the future of Detroit just has to listen to the leadership provided by Antoine and Maurice and Lauren to see that we have a great future. My question really, though, has to do with the land bank. And the idea that there needs to be a purpose for every lot is a great idea, because Detroit, in essence, is an organism, and each lot is a cell, and we need to fix this creature on a cellular level. But about a year ago, when my understanding is that the inventory of lots that the land bank had was somewhere between 70 and 80,000, and that today it's close to 100,000. So my question is this: how do we get ahead of that without a solution on a scaled level?
Maurice?
I wish Carrie LaWan
Carrie LaWan
Monroe
is
was
here.
here. But I think my understanding is that this grand consolidation of the open space assets of the city, concentrating them in a land bank as the most efficient way to process them and get them back into private hands. I'm always reminded that the vast majority of the resources that the land bank has were in private hands. And the job of the land bank is to get them back in private hands, but to make sure that they have a productive use. We can't, while I applaud the side lot program, not everybody wants a side lot. Not everyone wants more, lawn to mow. There are other more efficient ways that we have to think about, well, what would it be like to get rid of 30 acres or 40 acres? Larger scale land disposition. So I'm particularly interested in that model. It requires a very creative set of ways of doing it. So while I think you shouldn't have to be a wealthy entrepreneur to buy 40 acres. But how do you manage an asset that large? And so do you have cooperative ownership? Do you have other kind of land trusts? And so the city is very, very much interested in finding a scale of land transfer back into private hands that can be successful. So in the Fitzgerald area, there will be about 12 opportunities for business owners to purchase land and start a land-based business. So we're very much thinking about how do we get to scale and get this land back into private hands. But I think it's a really perplexing, challenging question, because I've seen a couple of examples where the city in former administrations gave or sold land to an entity and then only to find 3 years later it was a blighted area. So this is by no means easy, but if you are the kind of developer that has some ideas, then I'm very anxious to talk to you about it.
Thanks, Peter. I think we have time for one more question. We're starting to wrap up. Is that right, Fred? I'm going to ask Fred Murray, my floor director. Oh, and my producer Daphne just said one more question. So here we go, young lady. Hi, what's your name?
My name is Carrington Watson.
Okay, well, Carrington, welcome. And what do you have to say here tonight?
Well, as a DPS student, I have noticed that schools have gone downhill, and I was wondering if schools could help neighborhoods and bring, kids can come to DPS schools.
Well, you know what? Why don't you tell us what grade you're in?
4th grade,
4th grade, and what school do you go to?
Bates Academy.
Okay, and at Bates Academy, what is your favorite class? What's your favorite subject?
Probably reading.
Probably reading. So what book are you reading right now? I think I saw you had a book with you.
Dork Diaries.
The Dork Diaries are very good. I have a 4th grader at home as well. And we're so glad that you're here tonight because education is a huge, huge part of the city's recovery. And people like you are a huge part of the city's recovery. And that is one thing that we talked about that we haven't been able to talk about. But having stable schools in neighborhoods makes a huge difference. And that is what we have been missing in a lot of neighborhoods when schools shut down. And you're right, it is very important for us to talk about education. And while I could talk about it, I'm going to throw it to the panel here for our last couple of minutes and have them talk about the importance of stable, strong schools in our neighborhoods and how that can build a strong neighborhood. Dr. Garibaldi, I'm going to go with you. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And Carrington and I met earlier, and I told her my secret that I was a 5th grade social studies and science teacher when I started out in college. So schools are very, very important. And as a former chairman of education for 7 years down in New Orleans at Xavier and working with urban schools my entire career, I think it's extremely important. That's why the university plays such a critical role in this neighborhood. You know, we're not just an anchor, we really are a magnet, particularly for schools. So we encourage students to come when they're 4th graders like yourself, to come and look at what a college is really like so that you can get the opportunity to dream a little bit so that 8 years down the road, this may be the institution that you will choose.
Are you recruiting already, Dr. Garibaldi? I think
I am shameless when it comes to that. But the other important thing is that we want students to stay within their immediate neighborhoods, and we want them to stay in the city. When I talked, my first meeting this morning was at New Detroit, when we were talking about an Excellent Schools Detroit. We're talking about more than 20,000 students, for example, in the city of Detroit, and the number might be larger, leave the city of Detroit in order to go to school beyond the city of Detroit in other public schools and private and charter schools. That should not be. I know Detroit public schools, when Detroit public schools were the jewel of the nation back in the 1970s. And I am a true believer that that can happen again. So that maybe in a few years, Carrington, you can be one of those students in your middle school. And we'll be able to stop the schools from closing down and really getting more of the schools to open up so we can have more young people like yourself.
All right, you want to take you can get some last thoughts in?
I'm a product of the public schools in New York. My children are both graduates of public schools. Schools are by far the largest stabilizing factor in a family's life. So if you have a good school, families stay in place. And so our goal is that just in that 20-minute walk that I was talking about, the 20-minute neighborhood, that everyone could walk to their school or walk to transportation that will take them to a neighborhood school. I actually think that that area of early childhood is an area that we have to work really hard on, and there's an opportunity. While we may not be building new schools in the area, we may very well address this issue of the gap between birth and first grade with an early childhood learning center. So I think these are the kinds of things that will bring families back. We'll have those who are here can plan to stay and attract new families as well.
As we talk about vibrant neighborhoods, I'm going to give you, Lauren, the last word in what you're working on with Live 6 and what you want us to take from tonight.
I want you to take from this that there are magical things happening here, And you're welcome to plug in if you like, but this isn't a blank slate that you can recreate in the vision of some place that you've come from.
I like it. And we will end it there with Lauren Hood, Maurice Cox, Dr. Antoine Garibaldi. Thanks again for the hospitality here at the University of Detroit Mercy. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Remember, you can always go to MiWeek.org and you can see back the entire program that you were here for tonight, the entire hour. It will be on demand starting tomorrow at MiWeek.org. We appreciate all of your attendance tonight and your attentiveness, and know that in the coming months we're going to be talking about education in Detroit and education as a whole in the state of Michigan. I'm very passionate about it, and that is something that we're going to be tackling here in the next few months. And I hope as we go forward and have more shows like this and reaching out in the community that you'll be a part of it and a part of what Detroit Public Television does and wants to tell Detroit's story. So thank you very much for being with us here tonight. Okay? Take care. Thank you. You guys did great. It was great.